What's going on, everybody? Tim from Tierfon Orbital. The Saberforge Count MKII. A not so straightforward build for a curved hilt. Pun intended. Alright everybody, so the Saberforge Count MKII. What I would like to do in this video is talk about the install. It was not a run-of-the-mill install for me. I'd also like to do a short demo for the client, and we'll wrap it up after that, right? So, full disclosure, it's going to sound like I'm complaining in numerous parts of this video. I did have some qualms about this hilt, which in turn turned out to be speed bumps for the actual install for this. Okay, I'm just, listen, like I've not been a fan of curved hilts ever. In fact, I don't think I've met a curved hilt that I liked, with the exception of the Bat Axe, which I haven't had hands on yet. But man, is that a beautiful hilt. So I went into this build with some preconceived notions about curved hilts. Listen, I've heard that curved hilts are a pain in the butt to do installs for, and I can tell you that they are. So we're going to start at the bottom and make our way up, right? So as we usually do. So you've got this giant pommel down here. You'd think you could put a 28mm speaker in there, wouldn't you? I mean, I did. You can't. So the part where this pommel unscrews, the threads here, and the opening, it's a 20mm opening. So the strange part about this pommel section to me is this, right? So you unscrew it. This opening is a 20mm opening. About 5 to 10 millimeters past that, it opens up again to 24mm. And it's 24mm all the way down. Let me turn it off so I can... or turn it on. So it's 24mm all the way down to the bottom, which, okay, that's fine. But if you've got this giant honker of a pommel down here, why would you not route it open to at least fit a 28mm speaker? I mean, nowadays, everyone, myself included, I want 28mm speakers in any build that I can fit them in. Right, you just get a better bass dynamic range with a 28mm bass speaker. If you got your resonance correct, it sounds fantastic. There are 24mm speakers sound fine, but like if you've got the room to do it, why not do a 28mm inner diameter in there? I don't know. I don't get it. So anyway, that's complaint number one. At the bottom here, we've got a USBC charging port. This is for charging your battery, but it also serves as your data transfer port. So if you want to change your fonts, or upload new fonts, or edit your config, you do that through here. This connects to the Proffie that's all the way up in the grip section here. So making our way up, here it is. This is the, I'm not even in frame, so this is the infamous red switch. The majority, if not all, of the Dooku hilts have this red toggle switch at the bottom. Okay. What my hope was that I would be able to reverse engineer this switch to see how Saberforge wires it from factory. So you can buy this hilt from Saberforge already, installed and wired. I was hoping I'd be able to figure out how they wire this. Nope. No idea. None. It's not even a toggle, like it's not even a rocker switch with a spring. All this is a piece of aluminum that's held in place with one screw, and it just slides back and forth. There are some channels in here to hold switches. I have no idea what the purpose of that is. I don't. And I asked around some of the forums. I just couldn't get any idea as to how they did it. Right, and while I'm on the subject, shout out to Benji from Nerf Herder Customs. Benji was available for me to commiserate with and bounce ideas off of, because he had recently gone through a Dooku install, a Count MKII install, and he ran into some of the same hurdles with that switch. It's just a strange mechanism. I mean, you've really got to, if you are to utilize this as a switch, it's got to be super accurate. And it's just, to me, like, to have a switch down there anyway is just super awkward, right? To activate an aux and a main or one or the other while you're swinging a blade around, or at least just holding it down here, it's just an awkward place for a switch, right? So luckily for me, I dodged a bullet on that one, and the client was okay with putting some, you know, physical brass tactile switches up top here. I would rather have my switches up near the blade anyhow. They'd be easier to activate when you're spinning it around. It's a more natural spot for switches, okay? So, dodged a bullet there. Making our way up towards the knuckle, or this 45-degree angle piece, there is a kill switch that lives in here that is in its own chassis. It's just like a kill switch holder that I designed in Fusion and put in here. By the way, while we're in the pommel, so I did install a 24mm speaker from the Saber Merchant, and I also had to design a speaker chassis to hold that speaker. Now, the way that I had to design that chassis is I had to install it from the back up, right? Because up here, it's only 20mm, right? So I made a 24mm speaker holder with like a chimney that goes up to that 20mm hole. We'll show it to you real quick. And the whole chassis is held in place with a set screw, right? The speaker chassis. Oh, and let's talk about the clocking of these parts while I'm in that area. So Saberforge, when you get this from Saberforge, it's all screwed in and everything looks great. Everything looks like it's straight, it's screwed in correctly. But as soon as you unscrew anything from this hilt and try and get it back together, it's not happening. A Saberforge gives you shims to like clocking shims or timing shims to get it so that when you're fully engaged and fully screwed that it's straight. But as soon as I unscrewed this to make my measurements for internal diameter and for the chassis and everything, as soon as I went to go back to screw it back together, it was already 45 degrees like cockeyed, even with the shims from Saberforge. So what I had to do is I made my own shims, shim that goes here, so this way, so when everything is screwed tight, it still looks straight. Okay. All right, so making our way past this knuckle, this is where the main chassis sits. So this is an internal battery setup. The battery lives inside of this chassis. The Proffie board also sits on top of that. And again, that lives in the hilt. It's not a removable chassis. And coming up, we've got our two brass tactile switches. So again, luckily for me, the client was okay with that. They actually preferred that. So the way I went about installing those is there's a rib here. This claw is part of an entire rib that goes all the way down the length of the hilt, okay? This claw removes, and underneath of that, I routed out holes big enough for the brass tactile switches. So those switches don't go all the way into the hilt. I would end up with like brass tacks that are like an inch long. I think they probably exist, but rather than doing that, they are underneath this rib, and they are insulated from the rest of the hilt. Okay, so there's not going to be any shorting or anything like that, or any incorrect button presses. So they live under there. And we've got a CC Sabers PCB emitter and a blade plug that comes with the hilt from Saberforge. Okay, so let me talk about this chassis real quick. So the chassis itself is a very, very, very basic battery holder chassis with a Proffie board that sits on top. I had to make room here because of that USB-C connector that's in the pommel. So the Proffie sits here. This channel is for where the male end of the USB port sits. So it's essentially a USB extension that goes into a USB-C seedling module. I believe that's what they're called. And that allows us to charge the battery as well as use it as a USB data transfer. So all of that sits in here. Proffie, USB-C module, and the USB-C male piece. Around the backside is your battery tray, and that again stays and lives in the chassis. Now with this speaker chassis, this is how I designed the speaker chassis, right? So it's got room for a 24mm speaker, and it's got to get skinnier as you go up that pommel piece, as I said. So I just made a little channel in the speaker chassis, and that's how the entire thing is secured to the inside of the pommel. The wires for the USB-C go through here and come out this channel, and that's how I wired it to that USB-C port that's in the pommel. So there it is, right? Full disclosure, it was my first curved hilt build. First one. I was warned. I was warned that it would be a difficult install, and it was. It wasn't easy, right? But I'm glad that we got it done. I'm glad that the client is happy with the changes that we made. And with that being said, let's throw a blade in it, and we'll talk about how to use it. So there are two holes in the top of this hilt. Let's turn it around, get the right angle there, Tim. So the top hole it secures the claw. The second from the top is your blade retention screw. It's a very large, chunky brass set screw that came with the hilt. So you just want to unscrew that. Take the blade plug out. Pop your blade in. As with any blade, we want to make sure we're not jamming it down in there. Just let it rest on top of the PCB pins, and then just tighten. You hear that? Gotta grease up that set screw. Just tighten the set screw, let it hug the blade. Okay. So to use the hilt, I probably should have done this before I put the blade in. When you unscrew this pommel, okay, be aware that there are wires coming from the main body of the hilt that continue into the pommel. They are protected with some heat shrink. With that being said, try not to let the pommel take the full weight of the wires. Don't yank it around. Just be delicate, right? So they're connected. This is not like a speaker pommel or a speaker pod. So just be aware of that, right? The kill switch is inside of here. You're gonna hear an audible cue. That means that your hilt is on, and then you screw your pommel back in. Right. So bottom switch is to activate. It's just such an. It's such an awkward. It's such an awkward hilt to spin around because it's curved, right? I mean, I could probably, yeah. Anyway, so what I ended up doing with the config on this particular hilt, so the aux is the top. So to change your fonts while the blade is off, you hit your aux. What I ended up doing with this config is the majority of the fonts, if not all of them, are all dark side related. All the blade animations are mine. They're all dark side related as well. So yeah, so aux to switch your fonts, and you just activate, right? All your flashes work. It's so weird to spin around too. I'm going to, as I always do, see what else we've got on here. As I always do, the config is going to be saved on the SD card as a backup. There's some other fonts that are on the SD card as well, so you can edit those and put them on your main config as you choose. But as I stated, I put the majority of the configs that are on here now are all like dark side related configs. They're dark side blade configs. You know, twist to activate, twist to deactivate, all that good stuff's on there.
I'll show you the dark side.
As far as hilts go, super iconic hilt. I mean, is there another hilt that looks like the Dooku? We've got curved hilts out there, but I mean, this is as iconic as they come, in my opinion, right? So, thank you very much for watching. As I always say, if you have any questions, if you have any criticisms, if you need help with anything, please don't be a stranger. Reach out, leave comments below. If you don't want to leave comments, it's fine. If you don't want to subscribe, that's fine too. I just like, hopefully this helps somebody if they're thinking about doing a Count Mark II install, or if they're thinking about getting one, they wanted some more detail. Yeah, so again, I really appreciate everybody watching. May the force be with you always.